So my name's Mary Bigball Lewis. I'm a character in the upcoming film for a Brave Space project, and I'm a Native American woman who is a member of the Colville Confederated Tribe of the Wenatchee, Iniat, and Moses bands, and a descendant of the Blackfoot tribe. We're here today to talk about the upcoming film project, and kind of our love for the outdoors and what connecting with the outdoors means for each of us. And my connection with outdoors is, it's home for me. I just love being outside and getting away from office life and just having fun. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'll let Chelsea introduce herself next.
So my name is Chelsea Murphy, and I am here today just to talk a little bit about the short film documentary called Expedition Reclamation. It's going to be the first film under the umbrella of Brave Space Media, and we are here today just talking about reclaiming our spot in nature. Me as a Black woman, it's super important for me to see representation in the outdoors. So that's kind of what I do as a job. I have an Instagram platform called She Colors Nature on IG, and I basically just share my lived experiences that I have in connection to the outdoors, and I talk about what it feels like to be a Black woman out in nature, and how sometimes I don't always feel welcome or have a spot as far as like just belonging. And so, yeah, I use my voice to advocate for representation in the outdoors, and I work with brands that align with my mission. And I'm super excited to just be here today talking about our film that we're doing, representing women of color in the outdoors and the importance behind that, and seeing that in outdoor film, so that next time I go to an outdoor film festival, I will feel inspired, and also just be able to share that with generations that come after me as well. So that's important to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Erin Nash, and I am a filmmaker and photographer here in the Valley. I grew up out in Lake Wenatchee area in Plain, and grew up in the outdoors, in the woods out there, and moved away for about 8 years, and came back because I missed these mountains and these spaces. And I've been doing filmmaking kind of full time for about 5 years now, and just in January started my own media company to focus more on the Brave Space project, and projects that are gonna come out of it, films that are gonna come out of it. Telling stories about mainly women in the outdoors, and representing underrepresented communities in outdoor spaces and in their relationship with nature.
Awesome. And so how did we all get connected? I know we have our own stories, and so I'll let you go first, Chelsea.
Yeah, I think that there's this natural thing that happens when you're an activist in a very small community. You know, naturally when you have a lot of the same things that you're fighting for or advocating for, your paths just naturally intertwine and cross. And I think, for us three, like we ultimately kind of all got connected within our activism. You know, you representing Wenatchee, and you just really wanting to see more from filmmaking, and me, again, just being a voice for diversity in the outdoors. And so, within our small community, representing being on panels and speaking up on discussions and different things. After the uprisings that happened last year over the summer in 2020, we were meeting in some of the same places, and we marched for Black Lives Matter in Leavenworth, and you were taking photos there, and again, it just happens naturally, I think, as we're getting together. And so I know it was about a year ago when Erin came to me and was just really intentional about creating something that was more representative of the outdoors that we all go to. And, you know, I think the outdoors is somewhere that has a lack of diversity, but you know, when you actually look at the community and different cultures, like we all go outdoors, and that's just the way that we were all brought up that way. You know, going into nature, playing outside, climbing mountains, foraging for food, gardening, doing those kinds of things with mom and dad. And I think it's so interesting. You know, it's hard to answer just that question, like, how did you get connected? I really am not quite sure. Like, it all just naturally, like, came together, you know. Advocacy is something that is super important to each of us in a different way. And I think, you know, when you offered, hey, like, do you want to do this film project? I was just like, I've never done anything like this before, but I am on fire for this topic, and it's really important and near and dear to my heart. And so naturally, I said yes to something that I was just like not really quite sure what it was going to look like, the process and, you know, just the time spent and the energy around it, all of the good energy and the community building. And, you know, ultimately, like, that's how we got connected, was through our activism and advocacy and our want to see change in this valley and beyond. And yeah, I think that we have this funny story where it all started with Blewett Brewing and a beer and a cider and just being on fire about what's important to us. And so I think this film project is really just the birth of advocacy and activism and wanting to see change, and really not seeing anyone else step up and doing it. So that's us. We're doing that.
Yeah, I remember when we first met, I think we thought maybe this might be about mountain towns in particular, and just the lack of representation of diversity in the outdoors, and that it is a predominantly white space, that there are barriers for Black, Indigenous, and women of color to be in those spaces. But it kind of, I love how you said that we kind of naturally got connected, because I feel like a lot of this project has very organically just come together, including the topic. You know, I know when Chelsea first put the call out for characters on her Instagram, we thought maybe we'd get 5 women responding, and 55 women came forward and said, we want to tell our stories, we want to be a part of this. And so we kind of just went with the flow and realized that it was much more about community building than it was about this film project, and that the film project would be a byproduct of this community that we created, and built together. And that all just happened super naturally. And I think we started meeting with everyone who wanted to be involved on Zoom the year of COVID. You know, we were doing everything virtually, which actually worked out kind of cool, because we were then able to connect with women in Canada and all over the United States. You know, we're coming together with this common love of the outdoors and wanting to be seen and heard in the outdoors and their stories in nature. And so that was really cool, and that actually ended up shaping what the film that we're creating now is about. We were a part of those calls, listening to these women's stories and asking them, what do you want to see in an outdoor film or a film about nature? And then gravitated towards that and created our interview questions around what was coming up in those conversations, which was a new way of doing things for me, of doing just a lot of conversations. And before we even got out with a camera, we were doing kind of a lot of interviews and listening and figuring out which direction we should take this. So I loved that part of the process, and just getting to know everyone and hearing all the stories and having that shape the direction of where this was going to go. And the topics that continued to come up were, you know, stories of childhood, of how people felt deeply connected with nature, but then growing up and realizing that there were these barriers because it's this predominantly white space, because of the system that we live in, and you know what it was like to overcome those barriers. We heard so many stories of resilience and of healing in nature, and just this overwhelming like reclaiming of this is my space and I do belong here. And so that's kind of where the title came for. Expedition Reclamation, going out and we're kind of reclaiming this term of expedition, which is traditionally you think of white men going out and conquering something, and we wanted to kind of turn that on its head of we are going out as women and women of color into these spaces where we have this innate belonging and reclaiming that that was never lost, but it may have been taken from these women. So, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
And I think too, before Expedition Reclamation came along, like we were calling this just the Brave Space Film Project, right? And throughout all of those moments that you spoke on, being on Zoom and connecting with these women and really starting from scratch, not knowing them, barely knowing each other, and just like building a community off of the ground. And what does that look like when you have all of these stories of these women that are so delicate, and should be treated as so, because oftentimes it's the first time of it surfacing. This is the first time that these women have had the opportunity to tell their story. This might have been the first time that these women have had the opportunity to hear their own stories out loud. And so we were really intentional about creating a brave space. And I know at one point, we were talking about, through all of this being very authentic and natural and just passing ideas back and forth, lots of outside porch time, 6 feet apart, trying to just like manage COVID and plan a film project. And so just lots of ideas came up about creating a safe space, and then understanding that like we can't hold that for everybody, and how hard that would be to truly create a safe space when we're all human and sometimes we mess up and we say the wrong thing. And so what does that look like, And then I remember you telling me that like it's not necessarily a safe space that we can provide for these women, but it's a brave space to tell their story and to tell it with confidence, and to be empowered by it. And, as we are wrapping up production and moving to crowdfunding and still checking in with these women and having lots of conversations and going back and forth and really becoming good friends with these women, it's just so interesting to me that's exactly what happened. What we did is working, which is like so interesting when you think about the process and how much time and energy you put into something. Like it paid off, because these women are feeling the same things we are. Like we managed COVID, like we thrived, we created a community, like we are just seeing something happening right now in these women that I could have never imagined, and in myself even, I could have never imagined the benefits of filmmaking coming out the way that it is right now, just in so much positivity and just good community, and finally connecting with other women of color, brown-skinned girls that love nature as much as I do and want to summit mountains with me and plan snowshoes and go hike Mount Rainier and like do all these really rad things, but like low key, like we're just doing our thing, right? Like it's nothing crazy or abnormal. It's just, this is what we do, but we just have not been represented out there as much as we should have been from the very beginning. So It's just it's been a really cool process of being super intentional about every step of the way. And like, I don't know if I've ever really done anything in my life with such intention, as far as just really like, before I say something or before I do something or before I go somewhere, like we're stopping and we're thinking and we're acknowledging whose land we're on. We are having really intentional conversations about what the day will look like. And that's how we moved through post-production, production, and even now through crowdfunding. Like it's amazing what you can do when you move through life with intention. Everything really just starts to come together in a really beautiful way.
Yeah,
Definitely. And I really like the brave spaces and just being able to come together, because when women come together, it is empowering. But when we have women of color, it's a whole nother level. And it is, for me, it is a safe place. It's somewhere to be comfortable and to be authentic and for others to truly understand and not have to explain like different things. So I really appreciate being a part of it and sharing my story and hopefully empowering other women to step outside and see themselves out there.
Yeah, and we were so grateful to hear your story and be on production with you, and just, I mean, it's always just a treasure to have you, and so grateful to have you a part of the project, as we are, you know, a lot of our production was on Wenatchee land, and so it's really important to us to just, again, be intentional about what we're doing and who we're representing, you know, and who's out here.
Yeah, definitely. And we kind of touched about what is the Brave Space Project, as well as how it was born through advocacy and women coming together and wanting to tell a story. What are ways that you're doing things differently other than from other film projects?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that maybe Chelsea started to touch on was the Wenatchee Land Back. So that's the initiative that you're doing, and I'd love for you to explain more about what that is. But one of the things that we wanted to be intentional about is thinking about whose land we're on, where we work, play, and live. And we've been having conversations as a leadership team and dreaming up ways of how can we be a part of reparations for stolen land. And so one of the things that we have come up with is this new type of location fee for filmmaking, of seeing where we can direct some of our film budget to the people, the ancestors, past, present, and future of where we're working. So that's one thing that we're doing. And I wonder if you would explain a little bit about I mean, you're an artist as well, and I love that we can all connect on that level as well, and you're also an activist. Can you explain a little bit about what you're doing in the community?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it started it's a long time ago, but in 2019, me and my husband launched our second business, and we wanted to be intentional about it being more than just a T-shirt, or we've always wanted to create wearable art. And so that's something that we're really passionate about, is creating just really cool art. And it came to me that, like, being born and raised here in Wenatchee Valley, that there's not a lot of Indigenous representation or discussion about history. And oftentimes I was asked, are the Wenatchee tribe, is it extinct? And I'd have to say, no, I'm still here. So there was a huge void that was there that needed to be filled, and I decided, well, let's create art that teaches history and that we can educate a broad range of audience, from school age to parents to grandparents and everybody in between. And so we started creating art that tells history, whether it's landmarks and storytelling from the Wenatchee, Pisquosa, Indigenous tales, or just general history about the treaties that were not upheld up here on the Leavenworth land or throughout Wenatchee, and how the Wenatchee tribe, which is Pisquosa is our true name, never received the reservation that it was promised from the government. And a lot of people don't know that. We don't teach that. So that's really important to understand, and also acknowledge and pay respects. And so another way that I wanted to give back was to start a land back project. There's several other Indigenous people throughout the U.S. that are doing similar projects, that it's about reclaiming and taking back what was ours. And granted, we'll never have the full reservation because the land was stolen and sold to many different people. So it's not realistic to expect that we'd have this whole reservation to ourselves. So I decided to launch a GoFundMe for Wenatchee Land Back, and that project entails creating a safe place for Indigenous peoples in our valley. We have a diverse community, there's not only Wenatchee and Pasquosa, but there's many other Indigenous peoples that reside in our valley that there's not a true location that's dedicated to Indigenous peoples to go to and have that safe place to know that there's resources. And so that's kind of the whole project, is to purchase back land, build a community center, and a trading post that's going to sell authentic Native American art, that's going to continue to represent authentic art, as well as the community space is going to serve as such a huge piece in our valley. And we're actually moving forward with forming a nonprofit that's going to be Indigenous-led. And so we're in the works of getting that established and truly becoming a 501c3, which is going to be beneficial for long-term, and then just continuing to fundraise. So yeah, I'm really excited. The people that I've met are throughout Washington State. We have a lot of amazing people on there that have so many different talents and knowledge that we're coming together, and I'm just so excited. And, it can't be done soon enough. So, yeah, it's, to date with the Land Back fundraiser, it's going through GoFundMe as well as Venmo, and people do cash donations. We've raised just over $25,000. And so I'm really excited for what we can do as a nonprofit, and these 10 people coming together and really pushing it. So, yeah. And then I'm thankful that you guys have decided to allocate some of the fundraising through the film project to this project.
Yeah. I think that's just a big part of the intentionality that we've always been talking about. Like, I know me personally, I've learned so much from you, and I'm just so appreciative that upon moving to Leavenworth, meeting you and just being able to understand whose land I'm on. That was not something that was on my radar, honestly, before motherhood. And then, as I'm just trying to, I guess move through life with more intention of how I raise my kids. I'm appreciative of your uncle, Randy, for the books that he's created and the information that's out there now, so people can teach themselves and teach their kids about the different structures around, Two Bears and the Salmon People. I mean, those places and spaces are well known around in the valley, not often used in those names, Peshastin Pinnacles and Saddle Rock, also known as. But, when I'm talking with my kids, we reference them as they are. And I love that, and I credit that to you and your uncle and your family and the Wenatchee tribe. It's just so important, and I appreciate your brand, and I appreciate what you're doing in the valley.
Thank you.
For sure. It's huge.
Yeah, I think something else that we're doing a little bit differently is that we are intentionally a highly collaborative team. So we don't have a director. We have 3 co-directors, co-producers. We've got 2 cinematographers and editors, myself and Sanjana, and just doing things super collaboratively, which is really fun to do on this team. And I think that within that, just having a lot of conversations. I know that the first time that I met Sanjana on Zoom and we were talking about how are we going to work together, before we even got into the project, we talked about what are we going to do when we don't see eye to eye creatively, and what are we going to do if we come up against conflict with each other, or what is your style of working, and how can I best interact with you to encourage you to, come out with your most creative ideas. And so, before we even did anything creatively together, we had these conversations, which is something that both of us had wanted to do for a really long time. And this whole team has kind of been a really fun experiment of what do we want a team to look like and what conversations do we want to have? Well, let's have those. And, that's part of the brave space of being willing to show up vulnerably and authentically, even if we don't know all the answers or really what we're trying to get at, kind of fumbling through things, trying to communicate with each other. But having really open and honest communication about how we're doing on a personal level, because I think that I know for me, especially, in my art, like I have to bring my full self to that. And so whatever is going on with me personally, emotionally, spiritually, is going to affect my creativity. And so being able to be on a team where we can talk about that honestly and openly has been really, just life-giving for me. And this has been a really fun project. I think that, we're going through crowdfunding right now, which, wow, it's a lot of work. Didn't realize how much work it was. But even on days where I'm sitting in front of a computer all day and just working away at this project gives me such energy, because even though I may be home alone at my computer, there's this huge community of women that are standing behind and also supporting me and doing this work together, which is really cool. So I've loved that part of it. We're an entirely women-led team, creative team. Some of us have done filmmaking before, some of us have not. So it's just fun to learn together, and we all bring different strengths and skill sets to the table, which is really fun.
Yeah, and I think the makeup of our team, the cultures in our team, and the identities of our team, it being multicultural, is so important. And I think it might not be the first of its kind, but I think it's rare to see first an all-women filmmaking team, and then we have several different cultures within that makeup of who's behind the camera. And I think so much of what we're doing is unique because of that fact. Like even the films that I see being created right now that are focused around diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are white people behind the lens. And it's just like interesting to me, because now being a part of this, I understand that like whoever is behind the camera basically gets to say what the film is about, right? And how it's created and what stories get to be told. We tried our hardest to be very authentic about leading up to the production and just allowing people to tell their stories as natural as they can. But even now, moving into the editing phase, the importance of having a diverse group of people or women behind the camera editing that is so important, because that's what the film is going to be, right? And so it's just interesting thinking of filmmaking and that process, and the danger of having only one narrative or one community always creating stories and always filming and doing the documentaries. That's just one story and one lens being told at all times. And so, of course, like that's what people are going to see when they go to film festivals. That's what people are going to hear when they're, watching documentaries or gathering for any reason. And so it's just interesting, like the importance of that and not really understanding until you're in it. I'm like, I love films and documentaries. That's my favorite way of storytelling, and that's my favorite way of like receiving someone's story. It's captivating, right? You get like sucked in by someone's story, and you can feel, and you're feeling all the emotions. And I just think that when you have a multicultural team behind the lens, that helps shape a story that I might be able to resonate with or validate with. Oftentimes I have gone to film festivals and just left feeling like not really inspired or not represented, and just, well, that was a great film about someone free soloing, but like I want to see someone like just walking with their children out in nature, just some of the most basic and casual things that we do out in nature. Or not, somebody like Nikki who has a ukulele and she's playing in the middle of Lake Wenatchee. I mean, those things are so beautiful, and I resonate with that. I'm not really quite sure why. We have totally different lived experiences, but kind of that same narrative of just being a woman of color in the outdoors and wanting to show up as that, and that's it, and the importance of just having representation in front of the camera and behind it is so important, and something that we're doing differently. And so far it's working, and it's awesome.
And having conversations about that too. It's not just that we're a multiracial team, but we're also talking about anti-racism work and how that intersects with storytelling and how it intersects with being in the outdoors. And so again, just going back to that intentionality and having conversations that may be hard or may be difficult or challenging for us personally or collectively, we're having those conversations. Like, how does me being a white woman affect being on this project? And just having those conversations, I think, is super important. And part of what I think we've talked about as a team, wanting to encourage people to work together in multiracial teams and to have these conversations about what does anti-racism work look like in storytelling or in art. Like it needs to be a part of everything. And so that's something that I think we also may be diving into that's a little bit different. And then Chelsea, you touched on, wanting to see films where a mom is, just walking in the forest. So one of the themes of Expedition Reclamation is redefining outdoorsy, that you don't have to go bag a peak or go down a rushing river to be outdoorsy. Those things are amazing, but you can also garden. You can just spend time walking in nature. You can write music in nature. The film features 12 Washington-based Black, Indigenous, and women of color exploring and adventuring and just having a relationship with nature and talking about what that means, and kind of shifting the narrative around this idea that being outdoorsy is us going out and kind of taking this experience and flipping that on its head and talking about how it's a reciprocal relationship and what can we give back to the land and back to this experience, and what healing can we experience in nature, but also what healing can we help create in that space as well. So that's kind of one of the things, is redefining outdoorsy, and then also reclaiming belonging, and these kind of resilient, joyful stories of how these women have found healing and have reclaimed their belonging in these spaces. Yeah.
I really liked what you guys said about looking through a different lens, because that's so important. I think that is often overlooked. That's something that I keep running into with Native American history, is that it's not from Native American lenses. It's from a white perspective looking in, and it's their definition. And it's so important that first-person perspectives are being told, and that women of color, our voices are being heard. So that's really powerful, and that's just what I love about this project, is that it is doing that, and so many people have heard about it. Like it's all over. So you guys are doing great social media marketing. It's been awesome. And so we have the, dreams for the future.
Yeah, I think that really when we think about this project and our dreams and hopes for the future, we're still in the process of dreaming all of these things up, because, we have started to create this film. We've touched a little bit into growing this community and really starting to see the potential of what this community can come to be, and just trying to grow and nurture it. And I think that those are kind of all of the first steps of what we want to see this film lead up to. So I know, like, a lot of what we've been talking about in our process of creating this film and, the overall narrative of the film project. But ultimately, like, for me, the film project is almost like a side piece. And, me being more of a people person, and just really always thinking about, how I make other people feel and just how I move through life, and the importance of relationships and having good, sound relationships over many unimportant relationships is much more important to me. And so the film project is kind of a side piece to this larger community that I want to see grown and nurtured and continued. And I think ultimately, like, I would love to see this film shown locally. I would love to be just hanging out in a big community of people that are excited about this film, where we could do some kind of an event around it, and ultimately just continue to uplift the Brave Space community and grow it and allow other people to understand that, like, this is a space for them and it's a brave space, and their story is important, and their story, we understand, is one that deserves to be told, is most likely one that has not been heard yet. And so, yeah, we've talked about storytelling workshops. We've talked about, I know one of our incentives for the campaign is getting little private classes with each one of our characters that wants to teach them something, because we have a lot of really talented characters on the film project, macrame makers and birders, and just, I mean, the sky is the limit on what women can do that are a part of our project. And we know, if these 12 women are so talented within that, like, there's got to be just like a wealth of talent out there of women of color that want to be in community with other women of color and allies or accomplices that want to gather and learn together and get outside together. And so, ultimately, like, the film project is a side piece to this huge community that I want to see grown. And I think, as progressive as Washington State can be, or shows up sometimes, we have so much room to grow here, in Washington State. We have so much community building that can be done around, not necessarily affinity spaces, but spaces that are brave and safe for women and people of color to be outdoors together. And so, yeah, I would love to lead hikes with people, and, something that's super near and dear to my heart are young people. I'm always with my kids, and I love hanging out with kids and getting into nature with them, because they have a totally different way of seeing the outdoors. If you've ever been outdoors with a small child, it's something so beautiful that I really can't explain. At that moment, I want to be a child, because they see nature in the most pure and innocent of ways, and it's so fun being out there with them, because, well, they're a lot shorter, and so they notice a lot more things closer to the ground, and it's always just so awesome, because sometimes, as an adult, you miss things. You're out there, and maybe you're in your head, or you're thinking about this and thinking about that and can't disconnect, and just go outside with a kid or a teenager. Like, they will definitely be the one to make you get out of your head and just be in nature and really experience that reciprocity and understanding the benefits of getting outdoors. And so, yeah, I mean, really the sky's the limit on community building, but, kids and youth, I think of our youth and how much they need nature right now and just to disconnect. And so ultimately, like, the Expedition Reclamation won't end with women of color, right? It will be something that hopefully is expansive, and it just continues growing from Leavenworth all the way over to Seattle.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the timeline too of where we're at, so we have that full picture. But so we shot most of everything, the interviews and these adventures with these women, this last fall, in the fall of 2020. We went out for a week and drove around Washington State and camped outside and, socially distanced, and were able to go on these outdoor adventures with these women and do interviews. And so then going into the winter, we had a couple more interviews. I know we went snowshoeing with you and Paige, and we got to go snowboarding with one of the characters, Ina. So we've been shooting throughout this last year, and we're now in the phase of doing some crowdfunding and getting sponsorship to be able to move into the editing phase. We may have a couple of pickup shoots, but mostly we have all the content. And then looking into the future, we're hoping that we have something to show and to start putting into film festivals this year, August of 2021. And so the first stop, I guess, for the film is going through the film festival circuit. We would love this to be in outdoor film festivals and others as well. And then past that, we would love to do, community events. I think what you're talking about, both events where we're helping people to get outside, and also where I would love to see the storytelling workshops kind of take off. We have women who produce podcasts on our team, filmmakers, photographers, writers. There's so many different types of storytelling amongst the characters and the crew that we have. So I think it would be amazing to be able to give other women the skills to then go into their communities and do storytelling like this. That's something that I think I'm super excited about, and also just the community building, and like you're saying, Chelsea, that expanding of creating these communities in outdoor spaces and having conversations about changing the narrative about what outdoorsy looks like, and who is outside, and talking about how can we take down barriers that there are for BIPOC in the outdoors and come together and, like you were saying, really be a part of that reciprocity and that relationship with nature and with each other.
Nice.
I think, too, when we're thinking about the film, once it is created, the importance of understanding that, like, this film is for everyone. And we've stressed that, and really can't stress it enough. We don't want people to see us and think, oh, like, this is a film for brown girls, right? And that's the only people that should go and watch that film. Like, we want people to understand that this film is for everyone, and it's important to us that everybody thinks that this film can be something that they should go and watch. As far as its narrative being, representative of women of color. We want white men to come and see it and be inspired. We want white women to come and see it and be inspired. Like, there is no limit to this film and what it can do for our community, and so many other communities as well. And just understanding that, like, this is something that we want to kind of propel us forward in the outdoor industry and the community that surrounds it. Like, we want people to understand what inclusivity truly means and what it looks like to feel that sense of belonging. And really, it's hard to have that conversation with somebody. It's hard to start that conversation. It's hard to be the person that has the last word in that conversation, but ultimately, like, documentaries are so beautiful because you can be at home watching this film, or, when we put that trailer out, so many people reached out to me and let me know that they watched it and they were inspired by it. And all people, of so many different backgrounds and abilities and ages, and I just think it's so important. And again, we can't stress that enough, that this film is not just for brown girls. This film is for everyone. And I think that everyone can learn something from it, be inspired by it, and honestly just leave having a little more of the puzzle, just one more piece to the puzzle of what it looks like to be inclusive and understand how some people haven't always felt that sense of belonging in the outdoors, and what that looks like to implement that into our communities.
Yeah. I really love that, and just truly being included and being seen as an equal is so important. And that we do want everybody to see it and be inspired, and just, you go outdoors and you don't question, well, why are you out there? But welcoming and just a hello. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that the themes of belonging and reciprocity, I think that there's a lot of potential healing that can happen for the entire outdoor community through watching this film, and through, being inspired by these women's stories who are there talking about their lived experiences. And I'm excited for that, for the ripple effects that there's the potential for hearing these women's stories.
Yeah.
So.
I
Definitely.
think last year, with a lot of the uprisings, like, it brought a lot more questions for people than it did answers. And we're seeing that across the industry and in our own communities, sometimes in our families. And I think that this film might hold some answers to a lot of our questions that we've had. And I'm really just looking forward to having conversations with people after they watch the film, because I know that everybody's going to take away something different. And I think that that's really inspiring to know that and to understand that we're creating something that potentially could have a lot of the answers to a lot of people's questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors and in other communities and industries across the United States.
Definitely. And so one of the final questions was, how can people get involved or learn more about?
Yeah, so we're doing crowdfunding right now. Our website is bravespaceproject.org, and we'll be doing crowdfunding through mid-April. So if anyone wants to support the film, they can go to the website and help support us there. And then just continue to keep up with our community on social media or our website. You know, when we start getting into the phase where we're doing events, that's where that will be, and we would love for the community to be involved with that. Mary, I would like to thank you for being here today, and it's kind of fun being interviewed by one of the characters, because the last time I saw you, we were on the other side of the camera, so thanks for being here to have this conversation today, and just for being a part of this process. You're a big part of this entire community and this film process, and we're really, really grateful for you.
Thank you. I appreciate taking the time to come out and chat about the film and learn more. So it's always great, and I had a really good time snowshoeing. So
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this for us, and yeah, I guess Icicle Creek Center of the Arts as well for allowing us this space and allowing us to spread a little bit more information about the film Expedition Reclamation, and we're just obviously like really looking forward to getting this out into the world so that we can continue to share a little bit more of the magic that's happening behind the scenes and in front of the camera. So yeah, thanks,
Maybe
Mary.
the next time we're here, we'll be able to show it in Snowy Owl Theater someday.
yes,
I love that. That's awesome.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.